started, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed the keynote. A lot of great speakers there, and we have some excellent content for you today. My name is Brian Singer. I am the head of Cloud Commerce product. Cloud Commerce encompasses our GCP marketplace product, as well as Orbitera, white label marketplaces, and multi-cloud billing. We also have Roger Pilse with us today. Roger is the EVP and Chief Innovation Officer at Pitney-Bowes, and he's going to talk a little bit about Pitney-Bowes' digital transformation and efforts to build an ecosystem. So I think one of the exciting things about cloud, as I've seen it mature, is that the strategies around why we're using cloud and why it's important to our companies have really evolved. In the beginning, we were moving to cloud to save money, right? We could pay by the drink, we could use services only as we needed them, and it was a lot quicker to provision a VM to get something up and running. As we've gotten a little bit smarter about how we use cloud, security has actually become a driver, right? What Google is able to do with security in its data centers and what we're able to do with increasing levels of automation is secure our workloads in the cloud to a level that we've never been able to do before. And as we've solved these problems, right, and as we've been able to get better economies of scale out of cloud, we've actually started to unlock new products and ecosystems. So cloud and some of the characteristics of cloud have actually allowed us to create products that could not have existed before cloud platforms evolved. And that's really what we're going to talk about today is, right, how do we actually monetize a product that we've built in cloud? So we'll look a little bit about pricing strategies and things like that. And then how do we build an ecosystem around a platform? Because as we've seen, some of the most valuable companies and products that are out there today actually are products that have enabled an ecosystem. Right. So when we think about building a product for cloud, we have to answer some key questions. One, how do we monetize it? What's the right way to ask our customers to pay for that service? And every company out there, and you'll hear from Roger, right? Pitney-Bowes, started as a shipping company, and you'll see every company is actually evolving into more of a traditional ISV software provider as our data is moving to cloud and as more of the services that we provide to our customers are digital. Everyone needs to start thinking about how do we become a software vendor ourselves? Right, and inherent to that is understanding the billing models that are available to us in cloud and which models are right for us as we build these services. And this is important to everybody in a company, from the BD guy who's going out and selling it to the developer who's actually building the product, because you actually have to think about the pricing and the billing model as you build out the product, and you'll see why in a few slides. So in the cloud, there's a couple of billing models that have become very common, and there's some good reasons for that. First is a subscription model, which everyone is probably familiar with. We all have subscriptions in our day-to-day lives. The key things to think about when it comes to subscription are that it's based on a capped set of usage. So you set the threshold for what a customer can use, right, typically within a plan, and that's basically the amount that you're going to charge them in any given month for use of that. Subscription works great for non-variable workloads where it's not changing that much. If you think about like network usage, for example, that could change a lot over the course of a month. So it's not great to have a subscription to a network, to a certain amount of bandwidth. But consumption, on the other hand, usage-based pricing has become much more common for cloud services, right? We use consumption pricing for GCP, for virtual machines. We use consumption pricing for storage. And this is based on the actual usage of a product. And we think about this as being best for variable workloads when you don't necessarily have a flat amount of usage over many months or in a given month, and you want to build a customer for exactly what they're using. So looking a little bit more closely at subscription, right? It's that fixed monthly price, usually prorated to a given date. And there's a few actions that are usually available to a customer when they have a subscription, such as upgrading or downgrading between plans. There's actually a lot of complexity here that you need to think about when building out your service, because the upgrade and the downgrade could be manual. You could say to a customer, we're going to cut you off unless you go upgrade your plan. It could also be automated based on certain business logic or rules that you want to put in place, right? You could say, we're going to let you use up to a certain amount, and if you go over that, we're going to put you into another tier, right? So when you think about monetizing your service, you have to make sure you have a platform that can support whatever model it is that you choose. The other thing that's very interesting about subscriptions is that you can have what we call a one-to-many relationship between the entitlement, which is the thing that the customer is actually buying from you, and the pricing plan that they're using. What this means is you could have, for example, one plan that is a yearly commitment that's paid monthly, and you could have another plan that is a yearly commitment that's paid yearly, right? Both for the same entitlement. In either case, the customer is actually going to be paying a different amount, most likely, but they're paying for the same thing. And this one-to-many relationship is really core to how subscriptions work. So moving on to consumption billing, there's a few different types of consumption billing that you could build into a service that you have. On demand is obviously the most simple. It's just what I'm using times the price for each item. In the case of GCP, there's a price for a VM for an hour, right? You take the number of hours of that VM and multiply it by the price, and that gives you your total cost. And so the benefit of this is it's very simple, easy to understand, right? The drawback is that it's also a little bit inflexible, which is why we have what we call tiered pricing for consumption as well. And what this means is that as you start to use more, right, you pay less. And you see this more in storage and networking and things like that, where you kind of expect to derive some economies of scale. And you can see the example here where as we go from 20 widgets to 30 widgets to 30 plus, the actual price per widget is coming down, and the cost, right, in each tier there gets lower and lower. The nice thing here is that as the customer is using more, right, they're getting the benefit of that discount, which is actually going to keep them consuming from you if there's other alternatives. One of the most popular models that we see out there, though, is what we call a base plus consumption model. This combines elements of subscription billing with consumption billing. If you think about a committed use discount in GCP, for example, right, there is essentially a subscription, a commitment, and then there's a per widget fee or per hour fee if you go over that. The benefit of this is that it allows you to charge the customer for the basic level of what they're going to use, right? You can probably forecast that they're going to have some basic level of usage, and you can lock that in. You can give them a discount for that, and then anything over that, right? They're still able to consume, but they're just going to pay a little bit more. And this tends to be the most flexible and actually confers a lot of benefits to everybody. One of the things that you need to think about, though, if you are going to do consumption billing is what are the metrics you're going to bill against? Some of the common metrics that we see are time, so number of hours, for example, that somebody's using your service. Data, how much data is stored. How much data is being transferred, storage, or just a count of something, right? It could be the number of connections that the user's made to the service. The key is that this is where the business really has to come together with the engineering team to figure out what are the right metrics, and then how do we count them, and how do we monetize on them for our service. So just putting it all together real quickly, whether you have a subscription or a consumption plan, right, you actually have to figure out what is the route to market then for this product. So you have a few different options. You could sell it directly to an end customer. You could also bring it to market through a public cloud marketplace like GCP Marketplace. And you can also sell it through your own channel. No matter what the billing model is, though, you have to make sure that billing model fits with the go-to-market that you're choosing for your product. So great. You've created a wonderful new product on cloud. You've added monetization. You've picked your route to market. Now comes the fun part where you actually get to go build an ecosystem around this product. Now, I think it's important to note that an ecosystem is not an app store. And just because you have an app store, it doesn't mean you have an ecosystem. I actually found this definition in a paper as I was preparing for this talk, and I really thought it did a good job of outlining what an ecosystem actually is. So I'm going to read it real quick. A software ecosystem is a set of actors functioning as a unit and interacting with a shared market for software and services, right? These relationships are frequently underpinned by a common technological platform or market and operate through the exchange of information, resources, and artifacts. So the really interesting thing to me is that all ecosystems have this common technological platform in common, right? And this is really core to actually being able to build out an ecosystem. So if you think about what has to be in place before you can even think about creating an ecosystem around your product, you have to have this common tech platform. It also really helps to have a stable customer base. So if you don't have customers that are using your product, it's very hard to attract other companies to build around the platform that you've created. So it's a question a lot, that we get a lot of the time is, should I work on building the ecosystem first or building the customer base first? I would say that building the customer base is very, very important because it's hard to attract that ecosystem if you don't have it in the first place. Your customers also need to be engaged with your platform. An ecosystem will only really form if they believe that they can make money by working with you and with your customers. And if the customers aren't engaged with the platform, it's hard to actually get that flywheel spinning. And then finally, you have to be able to create a trusted relationship with your customers. What you're doing effectively by creating an ecosystem and maybe wrapping an app store around it is saying that you actually believe these solutions are good, right? Your customers are going to be able to use them, they're going to work, et cetera, et cetera. And if you don't have that trusted relationship with your customers, it's very difficult to get them to start using third-party software. In terms of the actual product requirements, a couple things have to be in place. First of all, you have to be able to support the exchange of information. In today's world, that usually means that your platform has open APIs that third parties can use. So if you have data, right, that it's part of your platform that you're making available to your customers, you want other third parties to be able to provide services on top of that, you have to have some way for them to get at that data. So open APIs, extensibility are very important in creating an ecosystem. Couple great examples. Everyone's probably familiar with Google Play. I think actually Sundar talked about the Android ecosystem a little bit. It's more than just obviously the App Store. It's all the telcos, all the customers, all the app makers, right? And all of these entities are working together to deliver value to the end user. The common tech platform in this case is obviously the Android operating system, right? And you can kind of see how some of the elements in that definition apply to Android. GCP is another example of an ecosystem, right? We're all here, we're all part of that ecosystem. And some of the things we're trying to do to help that ecosystem organize and form are things like GCP Marketplace, which we've made available. So just a quick bit, like why are ecosystems important? I think some of this goes without saying, but for one, it increases loyalty and stickiness from the customers, right? If they're getting products not just from you, but from other entities, right, and you're facilitating that, they're going to stick with you over the long term. Second, it helps fill gaps in the platform offering. It's very difficult to have a solution that solves all the problems that your customers want you to solve, right? You will not be able to hire enough engineers to make that happen. But if you have a robust ecosystem, they can fill in these gaps. And then finally, it gives you avenues for additional monetization and value creation. So it goes without saying, if you build a marketplace, people are going to be buying things from that marketplace, and whoever is facilitating that transaction is able to take a little bit, a little bit of that value that they're creating. So the ecosystems can actually form without you doing anything, right? You'll see if you have a great product and customers come into that product, other third parties are going to want to get engaged. But for it to really organize and monetize effectively, it helps to actually have a place for customers to go to discover solutions and procure them and so on. So in terms of actually operationalizing, we look at it from two sides. The partner side, so these are the entities that are creating value-added solutions around your product, right? And in the case of them, there's really three things to think about. Onboarding, and this means bringing them into your ecosystem, right? Getting the contract signed, doing sort of the actual product integration work. Certification, so that means looking at the solutions that you're bringing into the marketplace and actually running them through some sort of certification process so that when your customers are using them, they can be relatively assured that they're going to work, right, and they can trust the solutions that are available from your partners. And then finally, go to market, right? It's not enough to just usually put solutions out there. Your partners, whoever is participating in your ecosystem is going to need help selling. On the customer side, there's some basic things that customers need in order to make the ecosystem effective. They have to be able to find the solutions that are out there. Right? This is where the App Store becomes very important. App Store, marketplace, whatever you want to call it. They have to be able to purchase solutions, and it really helps for them to be able to purchase from a central entity, right? You don't want your customers to be able to have to go to many different entities in the, many different organizations, right, to use products along with your platform. You want them to be able to centralize that procurement. And then finally, provisioning. That is basically, how are they going to use these third-party products, right? Provisioning can mean a lot of different things. It could mean deploying a VM, right, to a cloud platform. It could just mean turning on an API. All three of these things need to work really, really easily for your customers to have a robust ecosystem. So at Orbitera, we've actually built a solution to help you jumpstart your efforts with this, right? We can't solve every problem that you have for building an ecosystem, but some of the things we just talked about in terms of onboarding partners and actually making your solutions discoverable and making it easy to integrate and provision are things that the Orbitera white label marketplace is able to help with. And we'll hear from Roger Pilse in just a few minutes about how Pitney-Bowes is using Orbitera to build an ecosystem marketplace for their customers. Actually, perfect timing. So I'm going to welcome Roger up on stage. Roger is the Executive Vice President and CIO at Pitney-Bowes. Take it away, Roger.
You said a couple of minutes. I thought I had a couple. All right, great. Good to be here. I'm going to share Pitney-Bowes' journey. I'm sure part of it is unique to our company, but hopefully some of it is helpful and sounds familiar to what some of you are going through in your own companies. Pitney-Bowes is a 100-year-old company. We have had a long history in office equipment and services around mailing and shipping, as Brian went through, and our general set of solutions ultimately power commerce. 100 years into it, we had a new CEO come on board 6 years ago. We've undertaken a pretty dramatic digital transformation. Part of the transformation relates to a couple $1 billion of acquisitions in the software space that started 10 years ago. So in addition to the mailing and shipping heritage, we're in 3 categories of software. One is customer information management. We do data quality for customers like Salesforce.com. We're in location intelligence. We sell data to customers like Twitter and Facebook and customer engagement. So as we went through our digital transformation, it was a huge help that we had 800 software developers and a software business. We partnered closely with GE, who didn't necessarily have that, and that's been a key part of our transformation of mailing and shipping. And then the last piece of the equation has been really important, and that's e-commerce services. We do all of eBay's global shipping platform and have grown our global shipping business and our domestic e-commerce business to $1 billion now. So between that and software, it's half of our company. And we got our first taste of creating an ecosystem based on a platform in that e-commerce business, and that ultimately led to partnering with Google for our SMB business. But in our e-commerce business, we're actually both supporting eBay and also 250 retailers. We're connecting millions of sellers, millions of buyers, hundreds of retailers, tens of payments companies, tens of shippers via the Pitney-Bowes Commerce Cloud. So that ended up facilitating from 0 to almost $2 billion of gross merchandise value by creating that platform and that ecosystem in our newer business. So based on that, we said everything we learned, let's take that to a very traditional business of ours, which was what we were known for, which is postage meters and 1 million small businesses using postage meters. So it's a little bit of our history. The journey has involved a tremendous amount of technology change, and that actually was very, very critical to the building of an ecosystem. Brian referred a couple times to a platform, and I think a key part of the journey of building this ecosystem has been a very persistent building of a platform over multiple years. Our CEO was very forward-looking, kind of not what I've been used to be honest, but he really encouraged us to follow a journey. We basically laid out a set of technology drivers, like you'll see at events like this, built a Commerce Cloud, and there were three pillars of our transformation. One was design. So many of you at your companies, I'm sure you have design initiatives, but design and client experience was very, very critical. For those million small businesses, we actually built a client portal. So we have 4 million logins now a quarter, and that was very critical as we started to build this ecosystem and this marketplace. So design and client experience and creating a web experience was the first piece of it. The second piece of it was data and a data platform. So as we were progressing on this journey, we built one very large data platform, big data platform that served all the company's data needs. It became our IoT platform. It became our BI platform. It became our tracking platform. So we've got 30 products across the company leveraging our big data platform. And it's also the place where we create data about our customers, and that also will feed into the App Store and the marketplace. So as we build IoT capabilities, we built web capabilities, we started to build increasing amounts of data about our million SMB customers, and that's actually going to be very critical to our App Store and our ecosystem creation. So that was a very critical piece of the puzzle. And then lastly, as in terms of foundations of our platform, we basically transitioned our entire 100-year-old company to the cloud, just went all in. So we've got 35 SaaS products. Those SMBs, those million SMBs, almost 200,000 now, have a SaaS or IoT product of some sort. So, you know, we used to be an office equipment company. We sort of shifted to a cloud-centric client experience and then started offering our own IoT or SaaS products to those customers, and we sort of changed the center of gravity of the company from sort of office equipment and a phone experience to a cloud and SaaS-based experience based on the Commerce Cloud. So SaaS was critical to it. APIs was critical to it. Brian mentioned open platforms and APIs. So a big reason why we're here working with Orbitera is several years ago we jumped in with Apigee, which is the API management platform that Google bought. And we built our whole API platform based on Apigee now, Google Apigee. We've got 400 APIs on that. A business that was nothing grew to 120 million annualized based on that API platform. And so as we've built this platform and ecosystem, we're able to launch hackathons and developer programs, and they're all leveraging all of our solutions via that Google Apigee API platform. And then lastly, we jumped in with mobile, and that's another reason why we partnered with Google. The Apigee experience was really, really good, and we ultimately changed that office equipment to be Android-based, thinking, you know, we want to build ecosystems, but we're also riding others' ecosystems and platforms. So we went all in, and our latest generation of office equipment we launched at Google's New York headquarters last September. It's Android-based. It was the best-selling new product launch we ever had. We've already sold over 60,000 of them, and we've actually become a relatively mature, mobile-centric, IoT-based company. We partnered with the gentleman that created the Nest thermostat, now part of Google, and so those devices, we kind of transformed them like Nest transformed thermostats. So now they're digital, IoT connected to our Commerce Cloud based on Google. So that's sort of our journey. It's a little bit of context for the conversation. Ultimately, it's about business outcomes. I was emailing with my boss, our CEO, on the flight, and he just pretty much doesn't care about anything I said except for the business outcomes. So from a business perspective, we've been able to create $600 million of revenue from the Pitney-Bowes Commerce Cloud. All of our $150 million of revenue growth last year was based on new products. And we've got, as I mentioned, about 200,000 SaaS customers, saved about 15 million of costs a year in growing, reduced cycle time a lot, and really transformed the client experience to one that was really old school to something that's very digitally centric at that point. And that kind of brings us to where we are today. So this is, I think, my second to last slide. It's very, very complicated, so I'll just walk through it. So the reason why I'm speaking here with Brian is the next step of that journey in building the cloud was to build an ecosystem for our million SMB customers, just like we did in our e-commerce business unit. So Brian mentioned trust. When we surveyed our customers related to our brand, that was fortunately one of the things about our brand that stood out was trust. And we're an honest company, and we try to do the right thing by our clients. And I think those stable relationships, a million customers, very engaged, like Brian said, and that trust was sort of the foundation for what we're doing here. So I'll try to walk you through this hyper complicated chart. So in the center is the Commerce Cloud, which is all those platform elements that I talked about on the prior page. In the bottom left is our latest generation of postage meters, or latest generation of office equipment. So roll back 5 years, all we had was office equipment. Then we built the Commerce Cloud. And then in the top right, basically our 100-year history, for which most of us haven't been around for 95 of the years, we were intermediating $10 billion of postage between the USPS and a million SMBs. So we're basically a one-product company intermediating one partner. So we wanted to get increased stickiness like Brian described. We wanted to bring more value to our clients like Brian described, and we wanted to fill gaps in our portfolio like Brian described. So what we ultimately did based on the Commerce Cloud and leveraging the data we had about our customers is adopted the Orbitera platform. We actually made the decision at Google Cloud Next last year. And what we're doing now is we're essentially pivoting. So those million SMB customers that used to only have one product, we're now bringing additional mobile apps on the Android-based solutions delivered via the Orbitera App Store, additional Pitney-Bowes SaaS apps and third-party SaaS apps delivered from the App Store. And then ultimately, it's tied together with that web experience that I described, which is we call your account. And then on this side, which is sort of the other end of the other side of the two-sided marketplace, we've gradually, over the last 2 years, pivoted with additional services. Started with USPS. 2 years ago, we started intermediating services from FedEx and UPS as well, all via those same SaaS solutions. We wrap it all with our payment solutions. And now, based on Orbitera and Apogee, we're bringing more and more third parties into the mix through our App Store, delivered on the Android-based devices or via SaaS, via your account. So multiple delivery methods, multiple partners, and the Orbitera and the Apogee and the Google Cloud is making it possible. So ultimately, I already went through sort of why we're doing it, additional value, stickiness, filling in gaps, improving our small businesses' productivity. And I think that's about it. So I think we're going to have a little Q&A now. So hopefully that is somewhat helpful to some of your journeys.